Hello, and welcome to our newest guide video for a well-rounded Molten Strike champion build. Molten Strike is a melee attack that after a successful hit creates several projectiles that slowly fall on the ground, dealing area damage on the impact, and each projectile can hit the same target separately, making it one of the highest damage output attack skill in the game. It can be used with any melee weapon, which makes it very universal. In this variant we decided to use a unique two-handed elemental sword called RAKIATA'S. Attack with this weapon treats enemy resistance values as inverted, which makes most enemies an easy target against elemental damage. While inverting, you can still penetrate their resistances further, but you don't have to worry about elemental curses or exposures. There is an elemental mastery that grants you a 25% chance to apply this effect to your hits with any weapon, but guaranteeing this effect is always better. The Molten Strike has excellent synergy with the returning projectile mechanic. After the first impact they will bounce back to you, focusing in a small area around, which will simply double your damage if you stand directly on top of your enemy. To obtain this effect you can use either the Nemesis Ring or returning projectiles support gem. It's not a crit build, but you will need more accuracy than maximum life as you have to allocate the precise technique keystone, which grants you 40% more attack damage. Proper positioning and use of your utility skills like Smite are very important for high DPS output. Champion is a great defensive-oriented pick for any attack build. It grants you permanent 20 stacks of Fortify, a lot of armor and evasion, adrenaline, and a free banner with the increased effect of skill aura. The Petrified Blood slows down the incoming damage and makes your life leech more effective. Lots of projectiles and high attack speed on your leap slam make this build quite fast at clearing maps. It is still limited by the melee range. The single target damage is excellent and raises even more against highly resistant enemies. It is slightly delayed by the travel time of projectiles. This build has no particular gear requirements for its functionality whatsoever. You can start it with just random rares and get upgrades with the farmed up currency. There are a few unique items worth using with this build. The first and most important is obviously the RAKIATA'S, but cheap and popular items like the Perseverance Belt or Voices of the Storm Amulet are also impactful. RAKIATA'S is one of the most powerful weapons for elemental attacks currently. It has decent base damage, and turns around the effect of elemental resistances, making most enemies very vulnerable against your hits. Its only downside is a very low base critical strike chance, which we don't use in this build anyway. The Perseverance is a great belt for most champion builds out there. Thanks to the Fortitude Notable you will gain a permanent onslaught buff which grants you 20% attack and movement speed. This belt also greatly boosts your damage with attacks based on the amount of armor and evasion rating you have. Voice of the Storm provides a lot of damage thanks to the Lucky modifier, which works very well with a wide range of lightning damage. With the precise technique keystone, all your hits will be non-critical. The Chaos Spirit Gloves convert all your life regeneration into rage, which you can use to sustain the Berserker buff for massive gains. You still have plenty of sustain thanks to the constant life leech. You can use the Dawnstrider boots as a pure damage option. They make the buff from Ancestral Protector much more reliable and more effective. The limit of only one ancestral totem type is not a problem here, as the Ancestral Warchief totem doesn't support Molten Strike projectiles anyway. The Nemesis Ring is an expensive luxury, but it is very much worth it, as it doubles your single target damage or at least allows you to use a proper support gem. Molten Strike fires its projectiles in random directions by default, so this ring has no downsides. The Lethal Pride Jewel grants you a lot of strength which can save you a few suffixes on your gear. It also can provide very useful bonuses to the passives in the radius you pick, such as double damage chance or maximum life bonus. The Watcher's Eye is a very versatile jewel. The only offensive aura you run is Precision, but you can mix it with other defensive aura modifiers if your budget allows for it. Additional life regen from vitality modifiers is also very useful to help you with your Berserk buff uptime. Your primary focus on rare items are defensive modifiers. Most of your damage comes from your passive tree and unique items. Look for spell suppression, maximum life, sources of physical damage mitigation, and obviously resistances. Life regeneration is also useful, as it will improve the uptime on your berserk buff. Your helmet should provide you with mana reservation efficiency, maximum life, resistances, and physical damage taken as elemental. The Molten Strike enchant for additional projectile is very impactful on your damage output. Remember to use hybrid evasion and armor bases, as they can also grant you spell suppression or life regeneration rate modifiers. If you can't get the RAKIATA'S dance, you can use any high elemental damage rare weapon you can find. To make them even better, look for modifiers that grant double damage chance or elemental resistance penetration. You can then use the Elemental Mastery to get a 25% chance to reverse enemy elemental resistances. You can get a lot of spell suppression on your body armor. It should also provide physical damage reduction and resistances. You can avoid life modifiers to activate the Life Mastery for a bonus of 15% maximum life. With Eldritch Implicits you can boost the effect of your auras. On your boots look mostly for maximum life and spell suppression chance, with a bit of resistance or attributes on top of it. You can skip movement speed modifiers as you will use Leap Slam to move around anyway. You can also get plenty of ailment avoidances here, but it is not that useful if you can't reach 100% of it. Instead of the Chaos Spirit, you can also use a pair of rare gloves, ideally with spell suppression chance, bonus to maximum life, additional strike targets, attack speed, and resistance or attributes. It will be more consistent, but you will lose the berserk buff almost completely. On the ring you should look for sources of additional or increased damage with attacks, maximum life, resistance, and attributes. You can also craft a special modifier that lowers your mana costs with non-channeling skills or grants you minimum endurance charges for extra defense. On a rare jewel you should look for bonuses to your maximum life, attack speed, lacking resistances or attributes, and accuracy rating. You can also get a bit of mana reservation efficiency here. Feed the Fury is a very powerful notable as you will always be leeching due to the petrified blood effect. The martial prowess is also great as it improves your accuracy rating which you need to fulfill the precise technique requirements. The third notable is the least impactful, but the Calamitous is the best pick in terms of damage. Those two notables found on the medium cluster jewel are extremely efficient in terms of boosting your damage with projectiles. You should use 2 of such clusters for maximum effect. The Bottled Faith unique flask creates a very large consecrated ground upon use, which boosts your life regeneration and increases the damage enemies take. The additional critical strike chance is not important in this build. As for the remaining magic flasks we suggest using Quartz or Amethyst Flask with attack speed bonus, Life Flask with bleeding removal, Granite Flask with armor rating bonus, and a Jade Flask with evasion rating bonus. Molten Strike is the main and only damaging ability in this build. It should deal mixed types of damage to activate Trinity's resonance mechanics. Most of the damage comes from the overlapping projectiles it creates. You can use the Awakened Ancestral Call to vastly improve your clear speed, and the damage will be still good enough for non-Uber content. The awakened version of elemental damage with attacks makes you immune to elemental reflect. The Petrified Blood spreads part of the incoming damage over 4 seconds. It also makes activating adrenaline from your ascendancy much easier. The Determination Aura grants a lot of additional armor rating, and multiplies it further. It is a mandatory aura for this build. The Grace Aura is used for increased and additional evasion rating. Just like Determination, it's mandatory to have it activated at all times. All those auras should be linked with the Enlightened support to reduce their mana reservation. Without it you would need to use the Life Tap support in every setup. The Precision grants you a lot of flat accuracy rating, which is very important for the Precise Technique keystone. It also reserves a flat value of mana instead of the usual percentage. Vitality is an aura similar to the Precision, but grants you life regeneration instead. It is very important for your Berserk skill to have lots of regeneration. Blood and Sand activates and swaps your stances. Being in Blood stance increases your area damage. The Sand stance grants you a bit more area of effect, but it is barely noticeable. The Arrogant support causes those auras to reserve life instead of mana. The upper half of your life is not used due to the Petrified Blood effect anyway, so you can freely reserve it with no downsides. Enemies affected by Sniper's Mark take increased projectile damage. Your projectiles will also split in all directions, which causes even more overlaps. Thanks to this setup, all your attacks will apply Linked Mark to rare or unique enemies. Make sure to have enough mana to trigger it, or add the life tap support if that's not the case. The Leap Slam is one of the best movement skills for attack builds. It allows you to jump and move around the map faster. It works very well with your high attack speed. Hitting an enemy with the Smite attack grants you a temporary bonus in the form of an aura that grants you additional lightning damage, which scales with your aura's effectiveness. You can use the Vol version for even more damage. Both of those utility skills should be linked with faster attacks support to make them faster, and thus less disruptive to your gameplay. The Defiance banner increases your evasion and armor while reducing enemies' chance to critically strike. Your Ascendancy removes the reservation cost on all banner skills, but you can still use only one of them at a time. The Berserk consumes your rage to grant you a very powerful buff that increases your damage and speed, and reduces your damage taken. Thanks to the Chaos spirits, you can use it almost all the time. The Molten Shell is a guard spell that is more effective the more armor you have. It creates a barrier that absorbs part of the incoming damage. The Ancestral Protector is a mandatory totem for every melee build. It grants you more attack speed while it is active. Try to place it away from danger, as it will die very quickly. The Blood Rage buff grants you plenty of attack speed but drains your life over time. It also generates frenzy charges, but you will get that effect from the Mark Mastery anyway. Kill all bandits to be rewarded with 2 bonus passive tree skill points by Aramir. As for the major Pantheon power, you can use the Soul of the Brine King to gain immunity against Freeze ailment, or the Soul of Era Kali to reduce incoming damage over time. The Soul of Shikari is a minor Pantheon power that also helps with damage over time, but only of the Chaos type, which is usually the most dangerous one. It is a great setup to level up with. You might want to pick up some damage notables in the duelist area, as a lot of the damage scaling comes from late game items. The build features 2 important keystones. The Precise Technique keystone grants you 40% more damage but disables critical strikes, and you will need to invest a bit more into accuracy rating than usual. Scaling critical strikes with the RAKIATA'S dance sword is possible, although it would require sacrifices in other aspects of the build, usually defensive ones. Opting out of critical strikes also enables you to use the Lucky Strikes mechanic, which makes the damage output more consistent. The Point Blank keystone is much more straightforward. It simply increases your damage with projectiles based on the distance traveled. In the case of the Molten Strike, this distance is very low, so the damage bonus from this keystone is at its highest. On your passive tree you will pick up mostly bonuses to maximum life, spell suppression, mana reservation efficiency, or accuracy ratings. It also grants you a bit of utility in the form Leech, additional projectile and strike target, or frenzy charge generation. It however lacks damage increasing notables, which you should source from cluster jewels instead. Your Ascendancy grants you permanent 20 stacks of Fortify and Stun immunity. To trigger the Adrenaline buff you can simply use a Life Flask, as it will heal you above the Petrified Blood threshold and let you reach low life status shortly after. This concludes today's video. We hope you enjoyed watching it. If so, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. Have a good day, and see you in the next video.